We are still on AWS. This time around, we want to look at Amazon Elastic Block Store. So, how is this different? Okay, now let's see the available services that we have. We can see storage. I don't find Amazon Elastic Block Store here. Okay, so where can I find it? So Amazon Elastic Block Store is usually associated with EC2 instances. It provides block level storage for use with EC2 instances. So just as you have EC2, right? So wherever you see EC2, you should be looking out for the Amazon Elastic Block Store. So I think we have it down here, right? So this is where we have Amazon Elastic Block Store. Okay, now, if you look at this now, under Amazon Elastic Block Store, I want you to take a look at something. If you look at under resources, you see I have how many instances running? I have 10 instances, right? And of these 10 instances, I have, let's see, let me look at something. Is there anyone I can deal with? Okay, anyway, let's just look at this. Okay, now looking at this now, for example, let's go back to our dashboard, right? You see, you have 10 instances, you have 10 volumes. So what it means is that for each of these instances, assuming I've not created additional volume to be mounted, right? So it is assumed that I will have one volume per instance, okay? So if I decide to create another instance, a volume will come with it. And now, how do we identify that, right? When you are trying to launch an instance, for example, let's see, launch an instance, just want to show you where that comes to play, right? So if you look at this, when you scroll down, right? You scroll down and you see this part, right? You see configure, right? You can configure storage, right? Depending on what you choose. You see, right now it's saying 8, right? 8 gig, right? Let's assume we come up here, depending on what we want to use. Let's say we want to use Red Hat, right? You see, Red Hat, and we are using the T2, okay, T2 micro. Let's see, T2 micro. Let's see T2 micro. Let's go back and see something. You see, the requirement has now changed. So the minimum we can have for that is 10 gig, right? So if you come up here and change it to something else, it could give you a different, let's see, Amazon Linux. Let's select Amazon Linux, for example. Come down here, you see the requirement is 8 gig. There's the minimum requirement, right? So now, given that all the instances I have are Red Hat, right? So I can see that the Elastic Block Store size that I have is, you can see, when I open this, you can see I have 10 gig, right? So this 10 gig is like your memory, right? Add disk drive, right? Which is usually mounted to your computer, right? So you have like 10 gig HDD, right? That is mounted on your computer. So that is how we look at this, right? So this is a volume. So what can we do to volumes, right? Let's say, you can see, let's see what volume is associated with what, okay? Let's try to do some naming here. Let's check out our instances. You can see these are different volumes. And these volumes are associated with different instances. Let's look at the instances we have. And let's see. Okay, let's look at the instances we have. Okay, let's take this, for example, test. Let's open test. Let's look at storage. You can see. So this is where the root device is. The root device name is this, right? It can be found in /dev/. So this is the name, the device name. So look at this now. This is a volume ID that we have, right? This is storage. You can see it's 10 gig and it's mounted to this particular one. You can see the volume ID that we have. So you can see this is the volume ID. So this particular one at 33D0, let me look for it right here under volumes. Let's search for the volume 33D0. 33, okay, this one relates to test one, right? Let's name it test one. Okay, 33D0. So this relates to test one. So we're trying to give it the appropriate name. So let's check the next one, the one I just created. So that would be, let's see, instances. So let's see test two, okay? So when we open test two, so we want to see what it is. So if we go under storage, right? You can see EBS, right? EBS, Elastic Block Store, right? And you know, the interesting thing is, if you go to, let's say, Amazon AWS, okay, let's just say, if you want to search different products, right? Let's log in, let's sign in. Just want to show you something. If you search for a service, for example, you search for EBS, right? EBS, to give you Elastic Beanstalk, right? So that's EBS, right? So, but this particular one is a storage volume for use with EC2 instances. So when you see EC2 instances, you should see EBS volumes, right? You should see EBS alongside, right? It's just like as you have snail and shell, so you also have EC2 and Amazon EBS. Okay, so this is not Elastic Beanstalk, right? This one is Elastic Block Store. Okay, so now let's go back to where we were. So you can see we are trying to get the storage for this other one, this test two, want to name it appropriately. So this one ends in EE25. So let's go back to volumes, EE25, so we can name it EE25, so this test two. So we can rename this as well. Let's name this test two. Okay, so let's save that. So these are the volumes we have, okay? So what can we do with these volumes, okay? Look at this, it is in use because it's associated with a particular instance, which we have established here, right? Based on the check we just did now. So what are the things we can do to an existing volume? First thing we can do is that we can come here and say, oh, we want to, let's see the options. We want to modify the volume. Let's say, for example, we want to increase it from the 10 gig that it is now to let's say, okay, they say it can only be increased but not decreased, right? So let's say we want to call it, let's say we want to make it 11, right? See, we can make it 11 and look at the maximum we can have, 16,384 gig, right? That's what we can change it to. That's the maximum we can change it to. That's about 16 terabytes, right? So 16,384. So we can increase it, right? For example, how do we do that? We just click on modify, right? Let's modify. So once we increase, if you are increasing the size of the volume, you must extend the file system to the new size volume. You can only do this when the volume enters the optimizing state. The modification might take a few minutes to complete. You are charged for the new volume configuration after modification starts. So this is an option. You can modify, right? Okay, so that's an option, but I'm canceling that out. So I'm not modifying. That is just to show you that modifying is an option. Okay, so that's that. So we can modify. Alternatively, what can we do, right? Other than modifying, like increasing what we have, we can also create a new volume, right? And after creating that volume, we want to mount it to a particular instance, right? After creating a volume, right, you want to associate it. For example, you have your computer has 500 gig HDD, right? And you want to add another 500 gig HDD, right? You want to add another 500 gig HDD. So what do you do? Okay, we want to add another 500 gig HDD. So all you need to do is to get the HDD, right? And mount it on the computer so that at the end of the day, we are talking about 1 terabyte, right? So also you can create a new volume, right? You can create a new volume and mount it, yeah, right? You can create a new volume and mount it on an existing instance, right? So you create the mount, right? Because creating it, merely creating it does not achieve any purpose, right? Because you just create and it's not associated with any instance. Okay, so let's create, right? Let's create a volume, for example, right? We can create a volume. Let's say the size. Okay, now there's something important we should note. Okay, so when creating a volume, you should ensure that it is in the same availability zone as what you have. Okay, what you want to mount it on. So let's look at this, for example. Let's see where it is. Let's look at this test one, for example. You can see the availability zone is US East 1B, right? This is the availability zone, okay? So when we want to create a new volume, right, that you want mounted, you want to be sure that it is a volume that can work within that availability zone because you are mounting to an EC2 instance. You are mounting on an EC2 instance. So you want to be sure of what the availability zone that you are currently in, okay? So I look at this, so let me go back to volume. That's East 1B, right? Let me double check. East 1B, right? Okay, let's go back to volume and let's try to create a volume. So the first thing I want to do is to go get East 1B, right? So I want to select, let's say, this is what we have by default. Okay. So I want to, let's say the size I want, I would say I could use at least, so it can be at least 1 gig. So let me put 2 gig, okay? So 2 gig is what I have here. So I've selected the availability zone. So let's look at the option. So do I want to create the volume from a snapshot? No, I don't. So how does this even work? Creating volume from a snapshot. For example, let's say you have a particular server and you have some data already set up in the server, right? And you want to duplicate those resources into the new instance, right, that you've created, or you want to have them duplicated. So you can create a snapshot, right? Then use that snapshot to create a volume such that the data in those in the previous volume can be replicated into the new volume. Okay, so now let's go to tags, right? We want to say add a tag and say name, right? I want to call this the new EBS, okay, for test. Let's just call it this. I can add a tag. This is an optional field, right? So we have that. So I can create a volume, right? So I can create a volume. Okay. Well, I create a volume. Okay. It's creating. So this is a new volume we've created. That's 2 gig, right? So because this volume is supposed to be mounted on an existing volume, let's see what we have. So it doesn't have any snapshot at the moment. You can see it is creating. So let's see what we get out of it. While this is happening, so let's see, let's select, let's identify. So let's say we want to work with, let's say we want to work with services, EC2. I don't want to close that tab or overwrite what is going on there. So let's turn on my instance, okay? I'll turn on, let's say test one, okay? Let's say I want to mount on here. So let me start the instance. So I come in here. What do I want to do? Let me go to mobile X10. That's my SSH client. Mobile X10. Okay. So test one. Okay, let me quickly launch the instance. Okay. Start the instance, which I've done. So let me start a new session. Let's quickly put that EC2-user. I want to go to advanced and use private key and select add .pem. Okay, that's my key name. So I've started this instance, okay, right? I've started this instance. Okay, now, if you remember, when we're looking at this, okay, let's see what we have. Is it fully created? Okay, it's created now. Is it attached to anything? No, it's not. You can see, even we can see what you can see. This one is attached. This one is attached. You can see where it's attached. is attached to /dev, right? See where is attached. You can see all these ones are attached. Okay, so this is the new one we created. You can see I want to use it for test one, right? And test one is in US-East-1B, and the one I created is also here. So it says okay, but let me just refresh just to be sure it's fully created, and let's see what we have there. Okay, so this is the one. You can see it is available, right? Right now, that is available. There are several things I can do. I can decide to say, oh, what can we do to you? It's not attached to anything yet, right? We can say, want to modify. Let's say, want to increase it to 3 gig, right? Let's say, want to change it to 3 gig, right? We can modify. Can take a few minutes to complete. Let's just modify it. We're just trying to see our options, right? So what else can we do? We can say, okay, still modifying, right? We can create snapshot like policy, right? Let's refresh this. Let's see what we get. Okay, so let me see whether it's fully done. Available is optimizing. Okay, 99%. It's optimizing. So just to show you that it's possible to modify a volume, right? So that's what we've done, is optimizing. So while it's at that, let's have some discussion around what we need to do, right? So right now, we are looking at this, right? We are looking at this, and you can see the actions, right? You can see the actions. So you can create a snapshot, you can attach a volume, right? So to attach a volume, you want to attach a volume, right? This volume, for example, to any of, okay, let's take a look at this. You can see attached instances. You can see all these ones are already attached, right? This is attached to test, Nexus. Remember, I told you we have 10 instances and we also have 10 volumes, right? So we have 10 volumes, we have 10 instances. Okay, so now that we have that, so we can want to look at attaching this new volume that we've created to test one, for example. Okay, so how do we do that? So now, if you are attaching to a particular point, right? So if you're attaching to a point, you need to be sure that you are creating something, right, that you want to attach to within the test one instance, right? So you want to create something. You say you want to mount, right? After attaching, you want to now mount it on here so that you'll be able to use it on the SSH client, right? So that it will be fully associated. So you want to mount it. So if you are mounting, it means you are mounting on something, right? And what you are mounting on should be a directory. So what it means is that we know the end game is to mount, right? But you need to mount on something. You need to mount on a directory. So what do you need to do? You need to create a directory that you can mount on, okay? So now let's check out let's just check out a resource on Amazon here. Let's say mounting, just Google search this, mounting EBS volume on Linux, right? Let's look at the options. So Amazon Web Services has something for us. Let's make an Amazon EBS volume available on Linux, okay? So these are some of the steps that we need to follow, right? These are some of the steps that we need to follow. If you look at this, right, based on what I just mentioned now, I said the end game is to be able to mount what we have, right? The volume we've just created, we should mount it on, look at it, this is the volume, right? It comes here, this is it, right? So it's here. So we want to mount it on, it could be anything, right? It could be slash data, it could be slash my volumes, it could be slash whatever I want to call it, right? So if you're mounting, right, you want to mount on this, you see, the command is mount, you want to mount this on this, right? But there's a necessary condition. There's a condition you need to fulfill. Before you can mount on something, you need to create something, right? So you need to make a directory, right? Which you need to mount on. But before we look at this, let's go back to our volume. Let's refresh just to be sure it's been fully optimized. And see that it's available, right? You know, we have 3 gig now, it's available, right? It's available to be used, okay? It's not in use yet, but it's available. So we'll come here. Let's check out the actions we can have. You can attach the volume, okay? So when you attach volume, so you want to attach it to what? Let's see, what volume do you want to attach it to? Let's say test 1, right? This one that is running. This is what we want to attach it to, test 1, okay? So this is what the device name is, right? This is what the device name is that it comes with, okay? So I can attach the volume. Look at it. The device name is this. So it is inside /dev/SDF, right? So that is it. So we can attach volume, okay? So we've attached the volume. So let's see what happens after that. You can see it is now in use, okay? The volume is now in use. Okay, the volume is now in use. It's been attached, okay, and is now in use. So what else do we need to do to be able to work with Linux, okay? Now, we've told you the end game, right? What we want to achieve. We want to mount on data, right? On whatever, we can call it my volume, right? We can call it my volumes, okay? So I'll call it my volumes, then we'll create something, okay? So let's go up and see what we have. So this is Amazon providing guidance, right? So says we could connect our instance using SSH, that we have done, right? We've connected, this is it. So let's just follow the steps. So we should connect, right? So the good thing about this is there are resources online that we can refer to, materials to provide us guidance, okay? So the next thing is to look at the device could be attached to the instance with a different device name than you specified in the block mapping, okay? So the output removes, okay? So let's look at this. We can check, list the block that we have, right? Using this command, okay? LSBLK. So we come here, let's do LSBLK, okay? Just a minute. That's LSBLK. You can see. So this is the existing one, right? You can see the existing one we have here. And this is the new one we just created. This is new block we just created, okay? So this is the new block that we created. So what do we need to do? Let's follow AWS for guidance, okay? Now, so this is what we have. right? You can see something similar to this. So now, although we know that there's no data on this, right? Because we did not use a snapshot to create this volume. We just created the volume from the scratch. We know what to expect, right? So there is likely no data, right, on this volume. But let's check, right? So what command are we going to use for that? Look at the command, right? Can you see the command? So we'll copy that, right? We copy that, paste the command, right? So this is, we want to check the file, right? We want to check the file type, right? We want to check what we have. So we click on this. So once you see data, it means it is empty. However, if we had created from maybe a snapshot, this is likely not going to be data, right? Because it will contain certain details, okay? So what are we going to see if it was not empty? So if it is empty, right? If it is empty, you see something like this, data, okay? But if the device has a file system, if it is not empty, you see something like this, right? You see something like this if it is not empty, okay? So you see, it's not empty, it will show something like this because it has a file system in it. So now, so if we use this command, we can use it to get all the information about the devices attached to the instance, right? So is that what we want to do? No. Now, let's look at step 4, right? This is conditional, right? You don't have to do this, follow this step if you already have a file system in the volume, right? If it is not empty, like in our case, we saw data, it means it's empty, right? But if it has a file system, we'll need to skip this test, right? You can look at it. Let's see what Amazon says. If you discover that there's a file system on the device in the previous step, skip this step. But if you have an empty volume, as we have now, we need to use this command, right? To create a file system on the volume. So because we got data, right, means our ours is empty, so we want to use this. You see, we are following the steps one at a time. We know the end game, right? We know we want to mount to a directory, right? And we need to create the directory. But before then, these are steps we need to take to prepare, right? So we want to copy this, right? To create a file system on the volume, right? We want to create a file system on the volume. Remember, let's go back here. Remember, this is the name, see, SVDF. So we want to create a file volume. So enter that, right? So that's how we do it, create a file volume. Okay, so what next? What should we do next? We didn't get an error, right? So if you had got an error, what command should we have to run? We run this command, okay? To install XFS, right? But with this, it shows that XFS is already in. So we're able to run, okay? So, but if we get an error, it means XFS progs is not in the system. So you need to install, okay? So now we are okay so far. So now remember, I said we can call it any name we want, right? You know, we can call it my volume, right? So we want to make a directory and call it my volume. We want to make a directory, right? And call it my volume. Because we want to create this directory Where do you want to create it? We want to create it in the root directory, right? As a root directory. So we use sudo, right? So you also see here, we have to use sudo because these activities are done as with escalated privilege, right? So we want to make a directory, but for the purpose of this, I can call it any name I want, right? But to make it simple, I want to stick to data, right? So that when you are going through these steps, you see what it is. I could have called it make directory / my volume / whatever, but for clarity, right? That when you are going through this website, you see what has been done, okay? So I copy this, right? I'm on step 5. So I come here, I want to make a directory, right? I make a directory, I've created a directory. So what next? I want to mount, right? I want to mount. So I mount, okay? So when I mount, I come here, I mount, let's see, I want to mount this, remember? Let's take it back. Remember, this is the name, right? So I'm trying to mount it on /data, okay, that I just created. It could have been / whatever, right? / my volume, / my app, right? But sticking to what AWS has on the site, okay? So I can just have this /data. So we've mounted successfully. So what else do we have? Review the permissions of your new volume mounts to make sure that your users and applications can write to the volume, okay? So we want to check permissions, right? So let's see. So we are on 6. So let's see what we have. Let's go to data. Let's go to data. So let's go to cd /data ls. Okay. So let's use, what's that command? lsblk. Okay. You can see this is what we have. So we have been able, let's see, we have this 3 gig, right? You can see it shows us that it's mounted here, right? See where it's mounted on /data, right? That's a mount point. Look at it. So we've been able to successfully mount this following the guidance provided by AWS. So the mount point is not automatically preserved after rebooting your instance. To automatically mount this EBS volume after reboot, see automatically mount an attached volume after reboot. Let's look at the resource we have here. So we can also look at file security. So these are resources that have been provided to provide guidance, right? So these are things we could also look at doing, right? To give rights to users. You can see, to access rights and all of that. So that is it. So looking at what's it called? To automatically mount and attach volume after reboot, right? And also see the steps that we have here, right? You can see the steps, right? But the major thing we want to do is to look at how to mount, right? And that we have successfully done. So we've been able to mount the volume, right? I'm able to mount it in here. Okay, so let's go to AWS to see what we have. So we can see it's in use. Okay, let's just look through and see actions we can take, right? So let's see actions we can take. So let's look at the actions, right? You can see it shows that we can't delete, right? It's grayed out, right? So why can't we delete? Shows that we can modify, it shows that we can create a snapshot, right? So for us to be able to delete, right, we first need to be able to detach, right, the volume. So let's see. After you detach volume, you might be charged for volume storage if you no longer need volume. Okay. Delete it to stop incurring charges. Okay. So if we detach, right, and we don't delete, we could still get charged. Okay. So I want to detach. So let's see what happens. And to detach. So let's look at the volumes. So, and as well, force detach. So I can say, let me force detach, right? Can force detach. So it wants me to confirm that I actually want to detach, right? So I want to say detach, right? Force detach, right? So successfully force detached the volume, right? So it could take some time for this to be done, but while it's ongoing, let's see what we can do. See, it shows the successful, but this still grayed out. Let's give it some time for the process to complete. Okay. Let's give it some time for the process to complete. Okay. So let's refresh. Okay, now it is fully detached, so we can now delete this. But before then, let's look at what we have, how it's displayed under here, right? So what it means is that it is now available again. It is no longer attached to test one, right? So what it means is that we can now attach it to another instance, right? Because it's now available. But also, instead of having it available, I can choose to delete it, okay? After deleting this, volume can no longer be attached to an instance. Are you sure you want to delete? Yes, I am sure. So I delete it. Do I see the volume again? The volume is gone. Okay, that's about all on that we'll look at on EBS. There's always an opportunity to explore, right? So that's the beauty. So we can explore and look at other possibilities, right? So, and if anything comes up, we can bring it up at the tutorial group and let's try to resolve it. Thank you for your time. See you in another session.